8:30, welcome back. Well, when you hear the term processed food, you may think of neon orange slices of cheese or maybe heavily salted frozen foods, but there's a lot more to it than that. And a nutrition group is raising eyebrows by saying that the processed food may be an essential part of the American diet. Here to help us sort this all out is board-certified physician Dr. Sanjay Jain. Dr. Jain, welcome to the show, and thank you. I can hear it now, people saying, what did she just say? Because we've heard, especially lately, that you really shouldn't eat any of these processed foods. What are you here to tell us today? And I should say you're also the author of Optimal Living 360.
Well, when I heard about this report, I got really excited. Does that mean we go back to junk food? So here's the report I have here, and it's about 15 to 20 pages. So I went through the report, and it basically misses the point. It focuses on population health, not on the individual health. So I want to kind of set the record straight here in terms of what they're saying in the report. So people get confused with what processed food means. And processed food, actually, a lot of foods are processed, from bagged vegetables all the way to like chips. So we want to kind of separate what processed foods are. So processed foods can, as I mentioned before, is in different categories. What we want you to avoid as an individual is the high sugar, high sodium, and high fat type processed foods.
So the processed foods that we think of typically, you're still saying that the artificial, as we said, the cheeses or things that come out of a can, the pasta and meat sauce in a can type of foods.
Now, some of those are okay because what they do is they add some sweeteners in it, some flavoring. That's okay. But when it really gets into high sodium, because if they're canned, there are going to be a lot of preservatives in there, especially the sodium is what helps preserve some of the food. So what's really causing a population outbreak of obesity, some other issues, is the amount of sodium and fat and actually the sugar that they're putting in these foods.
So has the term itself, processed, in the processed foods term, has that changed over the years?
It's been going on since the beginning of time. People have processed foods all the time, but what people get confused about is what is processed foods. So that can be anything: cutting food, drying food, heating food, anything in that category, fermenting food, irradiating food. So there's a big category in terms of what processed food means.
What is unhealthy? I know you mentioned the sodium, but what should we look out for? Because I don't want to send people the wrong message if they're watching that are like, oh, okay, great. Then I can, never have a fresh food or vegetable or whole grain. What's the message overall before we get into some of these specifics that you are here to tell the viewers?
Well, first of all, read the label, because the label is what's going to kind of guide you in terms of what's processed and what's not. So these 100% whole grain loaf of bread, you read the ingredient, it says 100% whole grain, but the first part of the ingredient is going to say enriched whole wheat flour, and that's what's going to chip you off in terms of that being highly processed. So these are things you have to really look at the label and trying to figure out what you're actually getting in their food.
Let's go. We've been showing the graphics, but I wanted to ask our producer, Mike, to show, first of all, the types of processing when we go through these. We're talking about things like canned salmon, foods combined with sweeteners, spices, etc. Can you tell us about that category first, the types of processing there?
Okay, so in the graphic that we have right here, it's like we got different types of processing. So as you have mentioned here, the canned salmon, so that's actually canned because it preserves it. So that's okay. So there's a good reason for that, because you don't want to have spoiled fish in your dinner plate. So the other things on the category here, you have cake mix. So what that is actually the sweeteners and sugars. A lot of these are just to add flavor. And what it does is these sweeteners actually kind of creates an addiction. This flavoring tastes good. So you want to have more. So when you start eating more, it creates a food addiction. You it's like a snowball effect. And some of the other ones you have up here, the ready-to-eat foods, the cereal and cookies, these are all processed, and they're actually kind of, like I said before, it creates more of an addiction. We want to eat more and more.
Also, we talked about how foods are processed, and these are things that we have been doing, you're right, since goodness knows when, how we're cooking it, drying it, freezing it. But when we talk about things like irradiation and then also the chemicals in it, is that where we get into some of the danger zones there?
Yeah, so some of the chemicals I put into it, some of the things you can't even describe and understand what it actually says. So when you look at these labels, if you can't understand it, a lot of times it's probably not the best thing for you. Stick natural. Natural foods are the best way to go. Whole foods, we go to these Trader Joe's. These are good places to get some of these natural whole foods, and that's the best way to go in terms of getting these non-processed foods.
Okay. And just to be clear, Dr. Jain is also saying that the health effects of too much processed food, of course, the things that we have said, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, also neurologic diseases. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Interesting, different way to look at what we're calling processed foods.
So yeah, that's really important. Let's define that and let's get a clarity on it, but stick with fresh foods if at all possible.
All right. The book is Optimal Living 360. This is Dr. Sanjay Jain. Over to you guys at the desk. Dr.